All right, trig ratios. The first two we're going to look at are sine and cosine. Now, all of this deals with right triangles. So if you don't have a right triangle, this stuff doesn't work. We're doing sine and cosine. Sine is the opposite side over the hypotenuse. Cosine is the adjacent side of the hypotenuse. The first thing you need to be able to do is to figure out which sides are the opposite, the adjacent, and the hypotenuse. Now the hypotenuse should be easy.
AB.
AB is the hypotenuse. The opposite and adjacent part depends on which angle you're talking about. So if I'm looking at angle A up here, which side is opposite from A?
CB.
That would be my opposite side. Opposite in this case just means away, other side of the triangle. Adjacent, what does adjacent mean?
Same. Congruent buttons up to them
Right next to it. This
is adjacent.
would be my adjacent side. And of course this is the hypotenuse. So if I'm talking about angle A, then BC is the opposite and AC is the adjacent. Alright? So if I want to do sine of A, the rule for sine is opposite side over hypotenuse. So which side is opposite from A?
CB.
CB or BC? Over the hypotenuse, which is AB. Does everybody see that? Opposite over hypotenuse. If I want to do cosine of A, cosine says it's adjacent over hypotenuse. So which one is adjacent to A? And then still the hypotenuse is AB. Alright? However, if I do this and I go to angle B, well now which side is opposite from angle B?
AC.
There's my opposite. And then there's my adjacent. It's just going to switch.
It's AC for
Right.
opposite. So for sin, that'd be AC over AB.
Not sin, sine.
Sine.
Sine of B would be AC over hypotenuse AB. And then cosine of B would be the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Do we notice anything about those down there?
The bottom always stays. AB always stays the same.
All right. If it's sine and cosine, what will always be on the bottom?
Hypotenuse.
The hypotenuse. Every single time. If it's sine and cosine, the hypotenuse is going to be on the bottom. There's something else we need to notice.
They just swap.
They swap. The sine of A is equal to the cosine of B. Those are always going to match. And then the sine of B is going to match the cosine of A. Alright? Hypotenuse is always on the bottom, and then the sine of one is equal to the cosine of the other. All you have to do on these is go to the angle it tells you, whichever letter, and then follow the rule for sine or cosine. So if I'm talking about sine of B, that means I'm starting up here. And I need to do the rule for sine. What is the rule for sine?
Opposite.
Opposite over hypotenuse. So what is opposite from B?
AC.
AC, which in this case is?
15.
So I'm going to say 15 over the hypotenuse, which is? So I do 15 over 21. If it can be simplified, you simplify it. So I get 5 over 7. Then I'm going to do cosine of B. What's the rule for cosine?
It's the adjacent.
Adjacent over hypotenuse.
Over.
So that would be 10 over 21. Can't simplify, so I leave it. Then I'm going to go to C. So sine of C, that would be opposite over hypotenuse, which would be
10 over 20.
10 over 21. And then cosine of C would be the 15 over 21, which is 5 over 7. Remember, sine of B and cosine of C should match. The sine of one and the cosine of the other. And then those two should match. Notice, which angle are we not using?
The right angle.
You never use the right angle. We're never going to do sine and cosine and stuff of the right angle.
It's either going to be B or C or whatever.
It's going to be the other two.
Yeah.
Right? Give me those other two right there. Shouldn't take long. All right, give me sine of x on the second one. 12 over 13. Cosine of x. 5 over 13. Opposite over hypotenuse for sine. Adjacent over hypotenuse for cosine. Then sine of z would be 5 over 13. Cosine of z 12 over 13. Again, what's always in the bottom? Hypotenuse is always in the bottom. And then you change, make sure the sine of one equals the cosine of the other for both of those. All right, sine of m would be
30 over 34.
30 over 34, which is
15 over 17.
15 over 17. And cosine of m,
16 over 34.
which is
8.
8 over 17. Sine of o is my 16. And then cosine of o. Are there any problems or questions with that right there? Identifying the sine and cosine. If you can't, you're going to be in trouble now. Everybody good with sine and cosine identification?
It's pretty easy.
Yeah. All right, get those copied. All right, if I want to solve these problems, I can't do Pythagorean theorem because I'm missing two sides instead of one. All right, so the only way I can solve these is do the sine and cosine stuff. So the first thing you need to do, identify what angle you got and then which two sides you have based off of that angle. So if I'm looking at this 27 right here, what side is that? Opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. That's opposite. And what side is this? What?
Hypotenuse.
All right, so there's my hypotenuse. If I'm looking at opposite and hypotenuse, which rule is that? Not sin. Sine. So the way you write it is sine of 27. The angle always goes with the sine or cosine. Equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. Opposite is x, hypotenuse is 10. Then we're going to solve that equation. All I have to do, if I see this, and I see the number in the bottom, cross multiply, and you've got your answer. You're going to type it just like that on the calculator. 10 times the sine of 27. Now you're going to have to tell me that one because I have no idea what it is. 10 times the sine of 27.
It's 4.53.
So we're going to do 4.5. We're going to do one decimal on the sides.
Rounding it.
Yeah. One decimal place rounded on the sides. We're going to do the 4 decimals if it says sine of the number. Does that make sense for 4.5? Why? What do I know about this side compared to the 10? It's got to be smaller. So if you do something like this and you get something bigger than the hypotenuse, you know you did something wrong and go back and fix it. All right, go to the second one. I'm basing everything off of this 36. What side is that right there? That's my adjacent side because it's right next to the 36. The 21 is the hypotenuse. And I'm looking at adjacent and hypotenuse. Cosine. Again, the angle always goes with the sine or cosine. So I'm going to say cosine of 36 equals adjacent x over hypotenuse 21. Again, if the number is in the bottom, what am I going to do?
21 times cosine of 36.
And get
16.98.
so if it's 16.98, we're going to say
17.
17 when we round. Tell me how to set up this third one right here.
Cosine.
All right, that's going to be a cosine 52
X over 11.
x over 11.
Be 11.
11 cosine 52 equals my x.
6.7 equals X.
All right. If I go to the last one,
Be sin 40
sine
equals X
40
over 15.
x over 15. If I see the number in the bottom,
9.6.
I multiply. Y'all said 9.6. I need to determine which sides I'm dealing with. So I start at the 31. That's the opposite side. That's the hypotenuse. So that's obviously going to be a what? Sine problem. So I'm going to say sine of 31 equals the opposite, which is
10.
over the hypotenuse x. You should automatically notice something different now than the last ones.
Now we have a bigger number than.
The X is now on the bottom. If the X is on the bottom, you're going to do this and divide. If the X is on the bottom, you will divide the number, the side, divided by the sine or cosine. Answer?
19.41.
So we're going to say 19.4. Does that answer make sense?
No. Yes.
I'm looking for the hypotenuse, right?
It doesn't make sense.
So the hypotenuse should be bigger than that side. Well, 19 is bigger than 10, so yeah,
Okay, yeah.
that does make sense. Right?
Sine.
I was looking at the 31.
If I'm looking at this second one right here,
That's cosine. Whatever.
if I start at my 47, there's my adjacent side, there's hypotenuse side. So cosine of 47 equals what?
12
12 over x, because I'm looking for the hypotenuse. If I see the x in the bottom, what do I do?
Divide.
Divide. 12 divided by cosine 47. Answer?
17.6.
Whoa.
All right. How do I set up the third one right here?
Cos 50 equals
Cosine
50
50.
equals 15 over
15 over x. Again, if the x is in the bottom, we divide. 15 divided by cosine 50,
x equals 23.3.
23.3.
Yes, sir.
All right. Last one over here,
Sine
sine of 39,
equals
23.
23 over x. X is on the bottom. I'm dividing.
X equals 36.5.
36 point.